Hello friends, my name is Keisha, and I'm a proud member of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. I'm also a survivor of human trafficking. My trafficking began in Canada and crossed into the United States. I was stalked, hunted, and ignored by the very systems that were meant to protect me. This is why, with my father, Dale Richardson, we started the CARES Project, an Indigenous survivor-led movement for humanity. We are dedicated to exposing human trafficking, government corruption, and holding institutions accountable. The judicial branch is broken. It has failed to restrain the evils that have come upon this republic. Whether it's family court failures, weaponization of the judiciary, COVID-era harms, or human trafficking, the courts have allowed these issues to continue unchecked for too long. One of the most powerful tools we're using is the petition for redress of grievances. These are lawful constitutional actions rooted in the founding principles of this country. On May 19, 2026, a formal petition for redress of grievances was submitted to the United States Congress. This petition is demanding that Congress and the President use the powers under Article 4, Section 4 to preserve this Republican form of government by restraining these abuses pending congressional investigation. Through the CARES Project Action Plan, we are mobilizing people across the United States to strengthen this effort. This petition has been created as a template. If you or someone you love have been hurt by these same systemic failures in the courts or by government institutions, your evidence matters. When you come forward, please bring your evidence along with a copy of the petition for redress of grievances. This helps connect your story to this growing constitutional record being placed before Congress. We are asking you to stand with us. Join the CARES Project Action Plan and help us build a precedent that demands accountability and protects the God-given rights of American families. Our united voices will compel Congress to uphold the Constitution and safeguard our liberties. United we stand, one nation under God. I will close with my favorite quote. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole. Men who will stand for the right, though the heavens may fall. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CARES Project podcast. Today we have with us Nadine Wellwood, and she's an accountant and business owner, and also someone speaking up for the freedom of Albertans and Canadians. Welcome to the show. You want to introduce
Thanks,
yourself?
Dale. It's good to be here.
Sorry, go ahead.
Great to be here. Thanks, Dale.
Yes, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself for our audience?
Sure, of course. So I'm actually not an accountant. I am a chartered investment manager. I used to own an investment securities firm. I've worked in the private capital markets for 20 plus some years now and have managed other people's money, high net worth individuals. And I have owned a number of different businesses. I've always been an entrepreneur, so I'm a little bit of a serial entrepreneur. Started out when I was in high school and in university owning my own little businesses. I've only ever worked for an employer once in my 54 years. And I got involved in politics about, when COVID happened. One of my businesses was in the aerospace and defense sector. I used to do modeling, simulation, human factors engineering. And so very familiar with the military. I've got a past with the military as well. And when COVID happened, I kind of went, something's not right here. I'd already gotten involved in politics just slightly with the People's Party of Canada and Maxime Bernier because I loved his policies. I just love principle. I love policies. And, because there's a foundation, right? If you can't just and abandon your principles, you can't just throw away good policy and abandon things, otherwise you're just whatever way the wind is blowing, that's the direction you're going, which is what I see most politicians do. They do everything on polling. And so I got involved and just really, I think, very naive in the beginning about how things worked and really had my eyes opened. And so I left the federal scene because I don't really think, in the beginning, I believe that Canada could be fixed. I do not believe that Canada can be fixed. I believe Canada is actually operating exactly as it was intended. And unfortunately for Alberta, that means that we are in a very abusive relationship because we are being used and abused for the resources that we have and for the talent that we bring to the table. But there's no representation here, there's no respect. And unfortunately, unless Alberta does something different, nothing is really going to change. And the status quo is not acceptable. So I got involved with the UCP. Didn't work out. They don't like conservative, libertarian-minded individuals who can't be controlled. And so just started doing my own thing and stayed involved in the political front. I have my own podcast. I wrote a book called Alberta Rising, a principled vision for a sovereign and free nation. And I've just been on the let's get some change happening and Alberta independence ever since.
I agree that Canada's in a very bad situation. And the only way that it would actually survive is if they got rid of the Constitution and cut off the monarchy and did something like the United States. And with Ontario,
I think
it's
that
not
would
going
be
to
a great
happen.
start. That's one of my fears here in Alberta is people are talking about leaving, but some of the people that are talking about leaving are still having the conversation about holding on to this Westminster style of government. And I'm like, absolutely not. I think if Alberta actually manages to break free from Canada, it needs to leave everything Canada behind and start anew, start fresh. And I think that the best system of government that I personally have seen is the republic style of government that the United States has, although it's not without its corruption right now and of its institutions. But it certainly, I think, starting fresh anew, a new constitution for Alberta and a republic style government, in which case, to steal a phrase from Bruce Pardy, I've had on my podcast many times, flip the script, in which case the government has no power. It is the power resides with the people. And the government is very, very small and very, very restricted in what it is able to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that also the mindset of Canadians need to change. I mean, at the end of the day, we have a mindset of subjects rather than citizens, and we have to understand even in the Westminster system that we have right now, the government still works for us. And if they don't work for us, then we need to deal with it. That's really it.
Sorry, let me turn that off. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it does start with mindset. And that's a re-education process, unfortunately, because I think our institutions, to their benefit, have certainly educated our even ourselves and now our children into a system that serves the government. And that means that the government's going to take care of everything for you. You just have to give them the permission to stay out of the way. I think people have really truly forgotten that, it is the people whom the government serves. It is a servant master relationship, but that's flipped. And right now, the government is dictating the rules and forcing through the power of courts and police and other institutions their will upon the people. And that's what really needs to change. So it's really funny, I have a number of friends who are very high level performance coaches. And it's like everybody has a coach and everything is about mindset. You have to visualize what it is that you want. You have to see how it all unfolds, but you have to be the one to do the work and you have to be the one to accept the responsibility for the outcome. And right now, in Canada in particular, we have a social welfare state where everybody wants everything, for free. which case nothing is free. If you are receiving something, then it has been taken from somebody else. And people, from a mindset perspective, think that's perfectly okay. Oh, they're entitled to somehow have what somebody else has had to work for. And I don't really know how we change that, except for a very slow, pragmatic approach. But that's the reality in which we live.
And I agree, but we also need the government to stop hindering people, because right now the government is hindering and interfering with a lot of people's prosperity, and they need to stop.
Yeah.
Because if you work, you should be able to afford a place to live. It doesn't matter if it's a small place or a big place. You should get something consummate to your work that you put in. When the government starts printing money, people can't afford stuff. And there are people that have jobs that don't have a place to live. That should not happen, ever.
No, I totally agree. And to your point about printing money, the government itself has the ability to print money, because what it has done is it has handed that responsibility off to central banks. And it does that because now it has a means of funding its own activities without having to go to the taxpayer directly to say we are increasing taxes to fund these government activities. It goes to the central bank prints it all off, and it then borrows from the central bank, which is a private institution. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on that, really needs to change.
What people don't understand is that the fact that they use central banks now, that's a sovereignty issue. Because
Yeah.
the Bank of Canada was created as an act. It's owned by the Canadian people. Now transferring that out to central bankers, that's a huge sovereignty issue, and that's a no-no. Trudeau should have went to jail for that.
Well, it's funny because people think that the central banks are owned by the people, like they're an entity belong to the government, but they're not. They're private entities. So if you take a look at, the Federal Reserve, the Central Bank of Canada, all the central banks around the world, these are not entities that they might have been created by the government, but they have their own life. Like they're privately owned.
Yes,
So why would you have to pay interest to yourself if you were just printing money? So the government itself has the ability to print its own dollars, to have its own currency. But what it's done is it's given that responsibility away to these central banks. And the central banks, being private, are charging. And I mean, you see it on your mortgage every day you look at it. If you look at the amount of interest that you pay, even on a low interest rate, most people are paying more in interest payments than they are on the principal payments of a mortgage.
well, what they ended up doing was they took it off the gold standard. They went to fiat currency, and every central, like, for example, Canada doesn't actually get its own money from itself. It basically comes to the central bankers and said, I promise to pay my debt. So we're going to value your currency at this, and you can have X amount of currency. This is insane. That's fiat currency. It's essentially monopoly money.
Well, for every dollar you deposit to the bank, and it's not even really a deposit, you give the dollar to the bank is then able to like lend that out 10, 15 times. That's fraud. That's money laundering. That's what that is. But because the government does it, it's legal. Now, I mean, I know a lot of people don't like that language, but that's reality. I can't take a dollar and then say, well, I have $1 and go and lend you 15. Right? That's where do you get the there's no collateral there, there's no security there. The only backing that the banks have in doing that is a promise from the government to make sure that they will make everything whole. So when people talk about these bank bailouts and stuff, well, of course, they have no choice.
Yes, and when it wanted to talk about, like, for example, the money laundering and stuff that you mentioned, and what my daughter talked about at the beginning with the judicial branch being broken.
Yeah.
This is why all of this happens. Because even in the UK, when judges were doing their job, they could restrain the king. And the reason why this happened, because the property owners were the counterbalance to the king. Right? Even because the barons, if they didn't like what was going on, they're like, we'll revolt. And we'll pull you off the throne. But we're not getting that type of we have get it kind of counterbalance. The people here in Canada are not holding the government accountable. This is why they're getting away with literally murder.
And it's not just the Canadian government, though. You see this around the world right now, where every government has amassed a significant amount of power for itself. But again, I think it is a bit of a re-education process where people need to understand that we are the ones that actually do hold the power. We have elected a government to do those things out of convenience that, like immigration, for example, protecting our borders, a military force. Those are the things that really the government should be doing. And realistically, people should be doing everything else, the private sector. And what the government has done is it's created all these oligarchies again and all these mass corporations because it can pick and choose the winners and losers. It puts regulations in your or my path, but clears a path for all these big corporations. Like, look at what happened during COVID. You had all these small mom and pop shops closed down. The small local grocer, the small local pub, the small local restaurant, the small local, all of them somehow had a different set of rules that was being enforced upon them. But yet your Costco's, your Walmarts, those were all too big. You couldn't close those down. And it's like, well, it should have been the exact opposite of that. And well, in my opinion, it should have been the same rule applies to everybody. So, it's one of those scenarios where the government has just become too big. It's amassed too much power. And then people have forgotten where the power actually lies, and it does lie with the people. But unless we enforce that, unfortunately, like to your point, there is no accountability, and the government's just going to keep doing what it does because people are too busy and preoccupied, whether it's with football and soccer or if it's, with keep their hand in the sand. And so many people don't think that politics is for them and they're not interested. But unfortunately, if you don't get involved in politics, politics is still very interested in you and it still has an impact on your life.
And I'll say to people, even if you're not involved in politics or don't like politics, you have to understand that the government is doing some grave moral violations. Because when you're stealing money, theft is wrong. If your people are dying because of what you're doing, murder is wrong. So you may not want to get involved in being in politics, but you can't allow the government to commit crimes.
Absolutely. And to your point, when you talk about murder, I mean, here, you have to be careful, like I would say the language that you use, but maid right now is assisted suicide, right? And, they were talking here in Canada about extending that beyond people who are in grave on their deathbed, severe pain and discomfort to, well, if you're mentally ill, you can opt to have MAID. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, well, if you're mentally ill, you're not in the capacity to even make that decision for yourself. People were depressed. I mean, Saskatchewan had put out a notice telling, teenagers, oh, depression, it will take you 3 months to get in front of somebody to be treated, but yet MAID is available, within 60 days. It's this kind of nonsense that's going on in Canada that makes you shake your head and go, what is really truly going on here?
Well, this is it. Like, I mean, for example, COVID. When when you're talking about the businesses to keep them open, what I was doing would have kept small businesses open because the government was dead to rights that they were doing wrong. They set the whole response down on faulty information. So when you do this, you've poisoned the entire fruit. The problem is that then they would have had to pull me into court and explain why they used poor engineering practices to set up the pandemic response. Now, when you're interested in making a lot of money off it and doing what they're doing, you can't have that happen because there's no way they can pull me into open court over this. I was talking to the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Saskatchewan, and I told the registrar, I said, go get your 5 best engineers. Let's have this conversation in public. They wanted no part of it because they knew exactly what the issue was. So when you look at every aspect after that, like the masking with the industrial hygienists, they didn't work. You looked at like the doctors talking about their protocols, they didn't work. Then the government imposes these mandates and shuts your businesses down, wipes out like small business, which employs like 65% of Canadians. What are you really doing? And then you talked about the May. People are losing their minds. They're broke. They're miserable. And then they're like, oh, by the way, you can't get treatment for depression for 90 days, but in 60 days, we can kill you.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, what's really going on. There's a real moral decay in society, because, again, governments can only really do what society allows them to do as well. So, I mean, we do have to accept some responsibility as the populace and as the citizens. We're not safeguarding our liberties very well, and we're certainly not holding our government accountable. So that is definitely something that needs to change. COVID was interesting because I had met Colonel Redmond, Lieutenant Colonel Redmond, retired, and his expertise was in emergency response. And Canada and around the world, they say, "Oh, we don't have any responses, no plan for an event like this," which was an outright lie, because he had worked on the plan for the event exactly like that, and it just became an excuse. And he was wonderful during the COVID years and still speaking out today about how we can fix some of the problems that he sees with Canada. But it just become self-evident that, they didn't want any solutions. They didn't want, they already had an agenda. They already had a plan that they were rolling out. And if you see what's happening now in the United States with Robert Kennedy Jr. and what he's been doing, and how he's been going after Fauci, they literally, the whole story here has not yet been told. And unfortunately, a lot of Canadians, a lot of Americans, a lot of the world has just opted to move on. But the truth is, there was a lot of harm that was done. There was a lot of people that have been harmed severely, and including death. And, nobody wants to address that publicly. And unfortunately, it needs to be addressed. Why? Because it was the government that did the harm. So you have to be careful when the government starts being, the one that forces death upon you, or, is encouraging that kind of behavior. Then, this is, I think, where citizens need to go. We need to take the power back, that they think they have. And we need to reassert our own individual liberties. And that means we have to accept responsibility for ourselves. So it means that we have to start taking care of our own health care. We have to start assuming responsibility for educating our own children. We have to be the ones to assert that, because the government is certainly not going to give back power that they have.
No, they never do. And we also have to understand that even though there's not weapons or anything like that, this is a war. And if you look at the way the government is acting towards the people, they're making war against the people.
Oh, absolutely.
They're cutting off our supplies. They're putting us into bad situations. And instead of traditionally just gunning us down, they're giving us like the vaccines that are giving people cancer. They're poisoning us in like everything. And then they're giving us mate. So they're getting us to exterminate ourselves by coercion.
Just if you think about the amount of stress that people are under, life is meant to be lived and enjoyed. And like you said, there's a lot of people that right now are feeling a lot about stress, feeling a lot of fear. Things are not good. And unfortunately, they're not good for pretty much the reason the government, like if you think about how much you pay in taxes, you see inflation. I was just going through and preparing my tax filings here for the end of the month. And, I looked at from 2020 to now, my property taxes have gone up 20%. My utility bill has more than doubled. And I look at my grocery bills, again, they've doubled. I mean, at one point you used to go away and you got, your groceries for the week for $100. Now it's $300 for a week. And for anybody who's trying to live on a fixed income or is just getting started in life, this is really, really difficult. Here in Canada, housing prices are awful. A house here in Calgary when I first moved here, you would have gotten into a home here for $140,000. Now the average home is over $700,000.
It's absolutely unaffordable. There, but this goes back to the whole idea of the money laundering issue. There, the money is not being spent properly. And if you look at the housing market in Vancouver, for example, you're getting a lot of foreign money that is being spent and being buying properties. When I lived in Vancouver in the 90s, you go to Southwest Marine Drive, one of the richest areas in Vancouver, you would find empty houses that were owned, or and then or you would have people that were paying welfare to live in $1 million homes. This was a lot of money coming from China that was being bought here, and it drove the prices up because they were hiding their money, their dirty money. Real estate, one of the biggest places to launder money. And that's affected the Canadian real estate market in a very bad way. It needs to stop.
Well, when free trade was first proposed, it was about we had a unified world platform, and then everyone was like, well, this allows everybody to do the best with what the resources they have, and then everybody shares. Well, unfortunately, that at some point breaks down, and we're seeing this, world trade that, right now with the Strait of Hormuz, you're seeing the United States. It's like, we can't take care of the world anymore. We're not going to police the world anymore. And then everything is falling down. But what's ended up happening is, to your point, you've got cheap labor coming from other places that are coming here. And unfortunately, the people that live in those cities, towns, communities can't compete. And so what we've done is we've priced our own children out of the market space. And then other countries have come in to fill that space. One of the ones I get a kick out of, and people talk to me about this all the time, are about um, a lot of the Indian population that come and they buy businesses in Canada. I think that's wonderful. But here's the problem is they have a different lifestyle and a different culture. They will live 3 generations, 4 generations in one house. Here in Canada and the United States, we've taught all our kids 18, get out, make it on your own, go figure it out, go get the hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and start. And yet they come to Canada, they buy businesses, they bring their kids up in a wonderful system. They all live where grandma's still at home to take care of the kids, and cook and clean. They're not having to pay for those types of activities or put their kids into daycare. Society has changed so much. And I think realistically, instead of blaming other people, we really do need to look in the mirror and go, okay, where did we go wrong? Because we've gone wrong in so many ways. And if are the ones who've, made the mistakes, then that's good news because we can fix it. Right. And so that's where I'm looking at now. It's like, where have we made the mistakes with our children, with society, with, the powers that we've given up to government, and how do we take that back for ourselves?
But in Canada, families used to traditionally do things like this. If you looked at farms and so forth, they would just build their houses on the homestead. And
Yep.
so you had a community there to help do the things that you needed and not have to farm them out. And then you just buy the things that were necessary. When we did things like this, the cost of living was very low because you could produce a lot of things yourself. when you're dependent on these companies, which are like the oligarchs, which are vassals of the government, you're dependent on the state. And that's
Yes.
the problem. We need to move away from this.
Yeah, and it's really a shame because to your point, back even my generation and my parents' generation, there was a family unit. We sat down, we had dinner every night. There was, my parents' families were much larger, but our family, even though it was much smaller, it was still a family unit. And right now, you're seeing the family unit was, victim number one, unfortunately, of a lot of these government policies. And I think again, a lot of this is just by design. It's the slow managed decline of Western society.
Oh, that's me. Whoops. The one thing I want to say about the family, that is the biggest focal point of the government to dismantle. Now, I've been working a lot with groups in the United States, and we took something in to Representative Anna Polina Luna in Washington, D.C., and they've been taking this information into other congressmen and so forth, exercising their First Amendment right to petition for redress of grievance. The family courts, they need to be abolished. They are the most offensive thing that exists. No due process. They're draining people's finances. Like, people are spending millions of dollars on lawyers, hundreds of thousands, and then they get nothing out of it. And their family's destroyed. And then you have like the Child and Family Services that are just randomly taking people. And now with the passage of Bill C-9, oh, well, you're a criminal. You read something from the Bible. Let's take your kids. That's out of control. That needs to stop.
C9 in Canada is certainly very problematic, but again, people themselves have to wake up to what is actually going on. And the reality is, the government shouldn't be making decisions about what you can read, what you can say. And I'm okay. If you want to say something that offends me, you actually, that I'm going to rephrase that. You can't offend me only if I allow you to. Right? Like you can say whatever you want. I mean, it reflects more poorly on you more than it's going to reflect on me if you say something that's harmful or ignorant or racist, then it reflects on me. But I can control my reaction to that. So, I always tell people if you don't like something on social media, change the channel. There's lots of other things to watch, other things to see. Something on TV you don't like, change the channel. Right? It's like, don't give it any views. Don't give it any attention. Just move on and, speak up that you don't like something, sure, but don't take offense to it. So, and C9, when you got the government that starts monitoring your speech and is now going to police what you say and worse, police what you see. And now here in Canada, we're going to have children that are going to have to show ID. So you want to talk about getting everybody into the system. This is part of the problem, right? They got to get everybody into their digital system too now. And so what better way to do that than, well, you need to prove who you are in order to get access to this, and this. And, all of these things, in my opinion, are criminal. But again, if people allow it to happen, I'm going to quote Alexander Solzhenitsyn, communism comes when people comply. So if you don't want communism, socialism, you don't want censorship coming to your doorstep, then don't comply.
This is a good time to take a commercial break, so we'll be right back after this.
Ontario, co-founder of Mark37.com. I spent my career in Silicon Valley working for high-tech infrastructure companies, and I've witnessed firsthand the surveillance apparatus they've built. Most of you already know we're in a digital war right now, but are you really aware that we're trying to fight this war with the weapons and tools of the enemy? That Android or iPhone in your pocket? That MacBook or Windows laptop? It's a tracking device feeding everything you say and do to companies that want you under their control or eliminated entirely. Every text, call, location, even how long you pause on a post, they track it all and use complex algorithms to then use this data to manipulate your behavior. If you knew someone hacked your devices and was selling your data without your consent, you'd be furious and terrified. So why are you okay with these companies doing this to you right now? Here's what they don't want you to know. There is another way. At mark37.com, we offer phones, laptops, tablets, and even basic flip phones, all running systems big tech can't access unless you explicitly give them access. And what's even better is you also don't need to sacrifice productivity. I'm one of thousands of geeks mobilized across this country, building tools and providing education and support to help you live anonymously online before they enforce digital ID. Go to mark37.com. Sign up for a free 30-minute digital privacy consultation. Join hundreds of thousands who have decided to stop feeding their data to companies actively working to enslave us. Take back your communications. Take back your data. And may God bless you on your journey.
And I got myself one of the phones here. So if you go to mark37.com and use the promo code CARES to get a 5% discount and keep your data safe. I mean, if they're going to break the law, make them work for it.
I figure it's too late for me, Dale. It's like they already know. I've put it all out there for years.
Yes, I hear you. But at the end of the day, with this, back to the digital ID, this is very bad what people are doing. The government is exercising control over the people. The people have to start taking their power back. And there are a number of ways to do that. And they have to do this lawfully. The government has to be checked, and they need to get resistance from the people. They're not getting that. And there's no more time to give anybody a pass. I don't care what anybody says. As far as I'm concerned, every premier and every person sitting in Ottawa, they're all responsible. And they don't get a pass unless they show otherwise with their actions.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point there because we are talking now, like here in Alberta, people are resisting. They are pushing back on this broken system and this failed nation we call Canada. And the hard part is if we're going to recreate something, let's recreate something new, though. Let's not fall into the traps of what we know, and let's take the best that the world has offered. And for that, you have to look at outcome. Don't listen to what people say, because so many people here had believed that Danielle Smith was on the side of Alberta separation, that she was trying to help the movement along. And I said many, many years ago, and I brought up many examples of where she stood on that situation, and including last year, at a premier's dinner, her words weren't, I will do what the people of Alberta want me to do, or there wasn't any of that. It is my job to make sure you don't get there. You can't be more clear than I do not support Alberta independence, and she made it her personal objective to make sure we weren't going to get to a ballot. And that's where we're at here in Alberta right now. We're going to have on October 19th a referendum question on whether or not we can have a referendum question. So we went from Alberta under a Citizens Initiative Act, the grassroots, the people themselves having to get 177,000 signatures to have their question put on a ballot. She's basically thrown all that out because she threw it, and again, strategically so, in front of the courts. People say, oh no, the elections officer. No, it's her bill that the elections office, couldn't make a decision on, that put it in front of the courts to begin with. But all said and done, we've taken it from 177,000 people who could have a petition under the Citizens Initiative Act to now what she's done is said 51% of Albertans, 51% of Albertans have to decide whether or not we even have a question, whether or not we even have a referendum on whether or not Alberta should be allowed to leave and whether they want to go. So, that the obstacles that kept getting thrown in the path, she's very, very good at playing the political game, right? And she's outwitted her opponents many, many times. She's played them is what she's done. She's kept them busy. She's kept them occupied. She's dragged this out in hopes that it would go away. And you know, I'm not bashing Danielle Smith. She's a Federalist, right? She's playing the other side. She's not on our side. The problem is when, you know, people on our side are looking at this and going, and they're making excuses for her. To your point, stop making excuses. Nobody gets a pass.
Well, and this comes down to the whole idea of our government and how this is laid out and what the people have to use. Because if people start reading about our government, they're going to realize that there's a lot of stuff that we have access to that we don't use anymore. And they've changed the way our government works, especially over the last 20, 30 years. Now, there are certain areas that the courts don't get involved in. And there are certain areas that the governments are supposed to get involved in. Like when Danielle Smith talked about she can't interfere in the courts, she's lying. It's not changing the decision of the judge, but it's the process of how the judge gets there. That's absolutely within her ability to deal with. Because our Constitution says that the administration of justice is under the exclusive control of the legislative assemblies of each province. So if there's something going wrong in the legislative branch, the province is responsible for dealing with it. She's refusing to do what needs to be done.
Yeah, we saw that in COVID here. You know, people thought that it was the federal government that were prosecuting a lot of the individuals who fought back, but it wasn't the federal government, it was the actual province. So, you know, again, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. Things have become so complicated in government. And I had Sean Buckley on a little while back, and we talked about the Constitution, and he's like, how many people have actually read it? Not the Charter, you know, of rights and freedoms, but the actual Constitution. Nobody. We don't teach it in schools. People don't understand what's even in it, let alone to be able to exercise their own rights. I keep telling people, I have an old copy of the Income Tax Act. It's 53 pages. Today, it's more than 4,000 pages in the smallest print possible. Like, how do you, even CRA gives out wrong advice. They can't keep it straight. So, you know, they've intentionally made things complicated and they carve things out for themselves, but you have to know what those carve outs are in order to access them, which means you're paying $800 an hour for a lawyer or a tax accountant. Most people don't know that. Why can't we go back to simplicity? You know, income tax is an easy one for me. You know, if the government requires some revenue to generate in order to provide services that the people want, sure, no problem. I can understand that. So why not collect 10% at the till? Why not collect 10% at the till? You know what? All those heavy legal fees go away, all those accounting fees go away. So you just save $3,000-$4,000 a year there, or hundreds of dollars at least for people who, you know, take it even to an H&R Block. You got the simplicity of it all is lovely because it's collected. You have nothing to do. There is no filing, right? It's collected at the till. The businesses submit that money to the government, their 10% of everything, and you're done. You're done. And now the government knows exactly how much revenue they have to spend. And if they can't spend any more than what they've collected in their taxes, you now have direct control over the spending. Because if they want to increase their spending, they have to increase the tax, which you become aware of. So right now we have excise tax, we have fuel tax, we have property tax, we have this tax. And by the time you add it all up, most Canadians are paying almost 70 cents of every dollar that they earn, not the government, they earn to the government.
That if you do the work and the government or someone else gets the benefit of your work, that's a slave. Because
well, the way the system is designed right now, they own it all and they allow you to keep a certain percentage of it.
Yes, and that's not the way things should work. The government should
Yeah.
not be taking your money. Right? So what people have to get out of the mindset that they're in. And at the end of the day, your government is made up of people, right? This is not some, abstract thing that exists. It's run by people. And those people operate like any other human being. When
Yes.
you take away accountability from people, that's an invitation to tyranny. Governments need to be held accountable. The only way the courts are going to be held accountable is if the government does their job. Because you have three branches of the government, and they're all designed to keep themselves in check. Because I started to look at the Commonwealth countries who started to set up the governments in Commonwealth countries, and they all echoed the same type of things that the Americans did about the three branches of government. And they also said the most effective tool is public pressure.
That's the only tool. That's the only thing that politicians respond to is the threat to their vote. And that's public pressure.
Yes, and they need to get a lot of that. And there's a lot of ways to accomplish this that we're not actually using. Like,
Well, people remember by design, people are so busy just trying to put food on the table, take care of their families, pay their bills, earn a living, maybe take a vacation. It's all by design. They are struggling to do those things, which means they don't have the extra time to actually sit down and go, why are things so expensive? And what can I do about it? So then when you propose, hey, you should write a letter or you should talk to your representative, people are like, well, I don't have the time to do that. And that's a fair response because they really don't have the time to do that. But the reality is if you don't make the time to do that, things only get worse and worse. So, it's unfortunate and I hate using the word, but I think we need a reset. Everybody keeps talking about the great reset. A great reset has to come. Is now the choice is though, do you want the oligarchs and the elites making those decisions and setting that reset for you, or do you want to be the one yourself to determine what that reset looks like?
yes, and kind of touching on what my daughter was talking about, what we were doing in the States. People have to understand where that petition for redress came from. It comes from the Westminster parliamentary system. Our system of government is what spawned this. I actually looked this up, going all the way back up to 1640, and how it is actually introduced into our system, but we don't use it anymore. And this is a political question that the courts don't have any jurisdiction to deal with. And it's actually, legally speaking, the strongest thing that people can do. And constitutionally speaking, it has a lot of significance because the last time that this happened and it was ignored en masse, 250 years ago, they wrote the Declaration of Independence because it's the final straw. When you tell the government that this is your final chance, do this or there's the door, people need to be at that point. Because if not, we're going to be in communism.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like I said, even here in Canada, Bill C9 and C22 and all these bills that are passing right now that are trying to even prevent you from seeing alternative viewpoints, for example, or misinformation. Who decides what's misinformation? The government right now is deciding what is misinformation. And unfortunately, the government is the one who lied through their teeth and showed us what they wanted during COVID, and they censored and stopped those and everybody who opposed what was contrary to their own narrative. So, when you give the government that kind of control, how are you ever going to get to the truth? Right? You only come to the truth by having conversation with a variety of different people who have a variety of different opinions. And then you start filtering through the facts. You start looking at the outcomes, the results. And the government right now is basically said, sorry, but that's not allowed in Canada. You're going to do what we tell you. You're going to accept what we tell you to be true and no more.
Well, and Mike Pompeo came to Canada, and he said that the average agent of the CCP isn't Chinese. He said an Italian guy like me or a white guy, which is what's happening. We're watching our speech being controlled by the government, and then you have the media that is controlled by the government, and our government is influenced by the CCP. CSIS has come out and said this in parliamentary hearings. And Canadians don't want to clue in that a country like China, by our own government agencies' admissions, is controlling and influencing our government. So you're not living in Canada. You're living in a Chinese proxy state by our own government's admission.
People, the funniest thing is if you and I were to do something, we would be forced to disclose the information, who funded it or who backed it or who said it. Yet government is never, ever held accountable. And if you talk about, governments here in Canada and just influenced by foreign actors, well, the reality is we know matter of fact. It's fact that there were Chinese interference in our elections and that there were certain MPs, and not just on the Liberal side, but on the Conservative side as well. And those individuals have never been named. It's kind of like the Epstein files in the United States. Why hasn't that list of names been released? Why? Because it's the politicians' names that are on that list. And, even I think Trump said some of them are his friends, but why are we protecting bad behavior? Why are we protecting things that you and I could never get away with that, right? If we do a crime, we're going to get hauled into court and we're going to have to go through due process and, we're going to be held accountable. But it seems that somehow that if you get elected to government, well, all of a sudden all accountability is off the books and you can just have really bad behavior. You can commit crime and you're never going to get held accountable for it. So to your point, it's not just Justin Trudeau. I mean, there were a number of MPs who they have identified who they are. They know who they are, and yet they do not release the names.
Well, that's the problem. This is where the people
That is a problem.
This is why the people have to take the matters into their own hands and pressure the government to hold them accountable. Because people should be in their face on a daily basis that they are dreading coming into their constituency offices or going to work in Ottawa, because they're going to be people in their face going, "What are you doing? Do your job, or there's the door." Eventually they'll cry.
Yeah, but again, unfortunately, people are struggling just to pay their bills. It's human nature to want to avoid conflict. It's human nature to want to live, I think, in a community, right? We are kind of herd animals, to be honest. We want to get along. We want to do our part. We want to help our neighbor, all these things. But the reality is, again, that things have become so complicated, so convoluted. And again, all by design. And I'm not disagreeing with you. I totally agree with you. Until the day comes where we're in their face every day going, no, no, give me the list, give me the list. You have to make demands of our government. And the United States is beautiful because in your government, it was made very clear and it was set up that, it works for you. And the day that comes when it stops working for you, you have the right to dismantle it and replace it with a new government. Canada is a little bit different because we still are under the monarchy. And that's another thing that people don't want to admit. But, you had that big No More Kings protest down in the United States, yet the king comes here to Canada and there's no protest. And I'm like, well, Canada's the country that's living under the king, not the United States. So, I do feel though for people because I've knocked on so many doors here in Alberta. I've knocked on probably 40,000 doors, and people are just struggling in so many ways. And, I don't want to blame, lay all the heavy blame on people because, they just don't even know what to do. They're overwhelmed, they're stressed, they just want to live their lives. And for me, it's like I'm no different. I lived that way right up to 2018 when I got involved in politics. All I wanted was for the government to leave me alone, just leave me alone. And it became evident in 2018 that that was never going to happen. And the direction things were going were just getting worse and worse and worse. And I don't want to live in a society that's not free. I don't want to live in a society where I'm being told what to do, when to do, what kind of car I can drive, how much energy I can use, all this nonsense. And, I'm watching the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And the beauty of Western society was we had this huge, massive middle class, which is just being eaten away.
Well, yes, and I mean, I just want to say something quickly. As a father, when someone threatens my family or their existence, my first thought is, how do I fix this problem to protect my family? Because I obviously I don't like causing problems, but I would rather sacrifice myself to protect my family because I don't want my daughters to have to deal with this situation. And if you're a parent, you got to think about what future are you leaving for your children, especially if you're a man, because we're the guys that go out and have to go and fight the wars and all that kind of stuff. We're supposed to be the ones to protect our families. So the men, they need to start standing up. I'm going to call them up. I see more women willing to do the work, but not enough men. I don't care what you're saying about your bills and everything else like that. You're not complying your way to tyranny. You're not.
And yeah, and that becomes the hard part, right? What was it they said? Evil does not prevail because good men.
When good,
It's
even
because good men do nothing.
Yes.
Right. And that's the problem. In the doing nothing, it just allows them to continue to do what they're doing. And unless they get the public pressure to stop, it's just progressively gotten worse. So again, they want you demoralized, and that's what they've done. They've demoralized so many people. They've overwhelmed them, right, with bills and taxes and burden. Even think like the regulatory burdens for a small business owner. It's just gotten to the point where it's insane. Mike, I'm of an age where my grandfather built his own house. He didn't have to ask permission to build his own house. He built it, right? It's still standing today. And people go, oh, you can't do that anymore. Safety. Everything's done in the name of public safety. Well, my grandfather was quite concerned about safety too. He had 7 kids to protect and a wife. He wasn't interested in building a house that, was going to intentionally burn down or do something shoddy. It's amazing how so many people think that somehow the government will do something better than the private individual. And that is the exact opposite is true. The government is always less efficient and it is always less effective than anything you will find in the private sector. But now people are talking about capitalism being bad. Well, capitalism in itself, in its pure form, is lovely. The problem is it's been corrupted as well because governments now subsidize. They subsidize big corporations. They subsidize this company, they pick the winners and losers. That's not capitalism. That's called cronyism. And so people don't even understand anymore the language that we use is very important to be very clear about what we're speaking about. Because when you talk about capitalism, capitalism doesn't exist anymore in this country. We have cronyism. Okay. And you're seeing that in the United States. We have oligarchs. We have these big corporations that are making, and they're the ones that are making the rules, and they're the ones manipulating government. Why? Because they're the ones who fund the person who gets elected.
When government is involved in business, that is literally fascism. And that's what we're living under. The people have to clue this in. And you have to remember, Hitler was a socialist. Like, we don't want these types of things. Socialism is bad. It is terrible. People should get the fruits of their labor.
Socialism is the stepping stone to communism. It always has been. And I mean, communism, it amazes me how many people actually want communism. And you see young people today fighting for the government to take full control of their lives. And I think it's a real shame, because the reality is it doesn't take very much research to go and see the outcome of communism. And every time, not just once, not just twice, but every time it's ever been tried, the government garners more and more control. And then the government dictates how you're going to think, what you're going to say, what you're going to do. It tells you how to live your life. And then you have no control, no say, until eventually, your life, it belongs to the government. And it's killed more people than any of the world wars.
Oh,
And
yes.
yet we have people advocating for it. And it's just pure ignorance. People don't know. You're going to have to pick up a book and read and understand a little bit of history here. And it doesn't take much effort to find it.
No, it doesn't. And I want to go kind of circle back to something you said about the Americans. The Declaration of Independence. Every person should read that document, because it doesn't say this is particular for the Americans. It says that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And among these rights are the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And then it also tells you that governments were instituted among men, and they derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. This
Yep.
works in every government system, whether you have a king or you have a democracy or a republic. If the people say no, that government is over.
Well, there's two things there that you brought up. One was that all men were born equal. So some people interpret that we should all have the same thing. No, all men are born equal under God. So each individual, though, is born with their own special gifts, their own talents, their own desires, their own ambitions. And that's the thing, is like, it's about equal opportunity, not equal outcome. Everybody somehow seems to think that everybody should have the exact same outcome. Well, that's called communism. Everybody's going to live in the same 800 square foot box and drive the exact same car and have the exact same amount of money to spend. That is not what the Declaration of Independence was about. This is what the Declaration of Independence was fighting, was to say, I am born a free individual. I should be free to be the best that I can be, to pursue those pursuits that I want to pursue, as long as I don't harm anybody else. And the other one that you brought up there was about consent. And that's so critically important, because it is all about consent. So like I tell people, and that just switch that out for the word comply. Do not comply, right? Alexander Solzhenitsyn made it very clear, do not partake in the lie. If you partake in the lie, then you're perpetuating the lie. You're giving it power. You are consenting. So you need to be vocal today. And so many people are afraid to speak up. And again, this is where you need a little bit of courage today, because I don't disagree with you. Things are getting scary. People are going to jail. People are getting their doors knocked in in the UK because they posted something, even years ago. And they're being hauled off to jail and fined, but we can't allow this to happen. So somebody has to stand and have the fight, right? And you can do it in the right way, and you don't have to do it with violence, but it has to be done.
Yes, it has to be done. And the division that they have in Canada is astronomical. And it's one of the biggest sources of the problem. Like, even in the independence movement, the federal government has a lot of chaos actors inside of that
Yes.
movement right now. The independent media, most of it is compromised. And whether they're getting it directly or not, they're influenced by the Chinese. When certain topics aren't talked about that need to be, that's not coming from the people. People need to start demonstrating courage and do what's necessary. And if you're afraid to deal with the consequences of doing what's right, then you should step aside and let the people that are unafraid do what it's necessary to save this country.
Well, what's really interesting, when you just talked about when you're afraid to do what needs to be done, think about that for a moment. You're living in fear of the very government who was put into place to protect your rights so that you could say what you wanted, so you could live the life that you wanted. So you obviously know, you have to acknowledge that there's a problem there.
Yes, because even with Canada's charter, how bad it is, it still says that that we have to live in a free and democratic society. So you can't use the Section 1 limit to bring in communism. You can't. It just doesn't fly, right? And it says
No, what they do is it's about public safety. They just put everything under the guise of a pretty title. So this is what the government does. You know, they'll put in an act and they'll say, "Oh, because it's about protecting children." Who doesn't want to protect children? But yet you get into the details of the act and you realize it goes much deeper than protecting children. And then it comes down to what I even say, go back it up even further than that. When did it become the government's responsibility to protect you from yourself, to protect a child from their parent? This is what people need to start asking.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, right. And this is the thing, like you have to go back to the principles. You know what? It is a parent's responsibility to raise their children, not the government's. So why do we need the government to put laws into place that say what they can see and not see on TV or on the internet? That's my job. That's not your job. That's my job. Get out of my way. Get out of my life, right? That's not a responsibility the government should even have. So, you know, these are the things that we have to start challenging every time the government comes out. But again, who knows about, I bet you if I did a poll and walked out on the street tomorrow and said, "Hey, are you aware of Bill C2, C7, C9, C22?" People would look at me and go, "I have no idea, Nadine, what you're talking about." Right? And because again, they're not involved. And I don't blame them because I am involved and it's really difficult to stay ahead of all of these things. So how is it that, you know, again, we have to get back to simplicity, right? They have made the system complicated for a reason because it serves them. You know, even here in Alberta, we have the largest government right now we've ever had in our history. And there's no reason for it. We have the largest budget we have ever had, and they keep giving more money to bad, failed systems. They give more money to the education system, which is a failure. They've given more money to healthcare here in this province. You know, Alberta has basically the highest per person rate that is given to AHS, and we have some of the worst outcomes. You know, why is it that we're waiting weeks, months to do things that you can go to another country and have done within days and weeks? Right. And then people say, "Well, Nadine, because we have universal health care." Well, we don't have universal health care. We have
That's not healthcare.
monopolistic health care.
That's not
Right.
healthcare.
You go to Japan. Japan has universal health care. They pay less money for it and they get better outcomes. Why? Because they have things structured very differently and it serves the people, not the government.
I just wanted to kind of circle back to the kids. People have to understand how liberty works and how liberty is protected. In order to a child to have liberty, it needs to have its parents, because nobody understands that child better than the parents. So the government cannot come in and say what needs to be done with the parents and the child. Now, the only instance where you should take a child is when a crime is committed. Now, if they have issues where they're trying to help the parents, there's fine. Because if you're starving a child or abusing a child, that's a crime and you should be charged. But outside of that, if you don't, the government doesn't like what you're teaching your child, too bad. It's none of your business. If I'm not committing a crime, not your business.
It's even more nefarious than that, because what they've done is they've convinced parents and they've set up a system in which parents really, you need two parents working today, right? So if you need two parents working today, what are you going to do with your child? You have to put them into daycare, or you have to put them into school. And then what happens is what they've figured out is they just need to educate the child in school, educate the child in daycare, right? So they now control the messaging, the narrative, they control the value systems. They're the ones building it. And then, liberty is lost, not because the parents, we know what liberty is. I know what liberty is. I grew up Gen X. It's like we ran around, we were feral children, for heaven's sakes. There was no rubber mats at the bottom of the playground when we fell off. But the reality is, kids today are growing up in a very different environment, and their parents are off paying the bills, earning an income to buy them things. They're not teaching them about liberty. They're not teaching them about freedom. And they're getting a completely different message right from daycare all the way up through school, high school, university, and beyond.
Because parents are now consumers rather than citizens of their countries, because they're worried about getting comfort. I had to study technology in university when we were looking at like what the Rockefellers did and so forth, and how technology progressed through the Industrial Revolution. What they noticed is the more convenience you gave to people, the more dependent on you they became, and they gave up their liberties in order to be comfortable.
Yep.
We have to not be comfortable and get our liberty back. That's really all there is to it. It's going to be hard work.
Yeah, well, absolutely, it's going to be hard work. Nothing is going to be easy at this point because things have gone just so far to the extreme on the other side. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of years, because I think the world is in a position of shift, right? I mean, and I hate using anything that Mark Carney says, but he wasn't wrong when he said that the relationship even with the United States here in Canada is ruptured. Um, Everything is different. The effects of that have not filtered through yet. I think the world economy, but everything is different. We are not living in the same world we were living in even 2 years ago.
No, I agree. I agree. I think that it's even going to be a little bit faster where we're going to have to start seeing a pivot. Because especially with what's happening in the United States, if some changes aren't made before the midterms, they're going to have a huge problem. And if that changes, then it's going to make it very much more difficult for us here. And so I mean, we need the Americans to fix their issues, because if they don't fix their issues, there's not much going to happen here. Because I deal with more Americans than I do Canadians on a daily basis. And I get further with Americans than I can with people here in Canada. That is a problem for the Canadian people.
But you have to remember the difference between Americans and Canadians. Canada was invited. We were asked, let's form this big union and break free from the king. And it was all loyalists that moved to Canada, right? So there was no desire for freedom. They all moved to the Laurentian, what we call the Laurentian Lorient, Quebec and Ontario, New Brunswick, in the east. And so the mindset, going back to mindset that you mentioned earlier, is very different in Canada than it is in the United States. The one thing I do appreciate about America is its entrepreneurial spirit, its love of freedom, and it is willing to defend it and fight for it. Canadians, they've never had it. So how do you fight for something that really has never been a priority and something you've never really had? We've always been subjects of the king. It's always been a colony, right? And so, here in Alberta now, we're more, I think, American in mindset than we are the rest of Canada. And I mean, I'd say that, because there are rural communities are definitely more American in their mindsets and more entrepreneurial, more conservative. But, when you take a look at even in the United States now, the big problem are in these big cities, right? Kentucky, which is a Republican state, but you go to Lexington and it's Democrat. Right here in Toronto, in Ontario, you go to rural Ontario, very conservative, but you go to Toronto, it's very, very liberal. And therein lies a big part of the problem. But to your point, it creates dependency, right? And, people living in the rural communities understand still, where their food comes from. Right? You ask a 5-year-old in Toronto, where does your food come from? It comes from the grocery store, right? Where's beef come from? The grocery store. It doesn't come from a cow, right? They don't understand anymore. We've created this disconnect. Front garages is one that I always tell people, one of the worst things I think we've ever done for a community is build on these front garages that you park your car in the garage, you get out, you walk right into your house, you never see your neighbor anymore. How many people even can name the neighbors on both sides of them? So it's a fascinating thing when you sit back and you look at it, but it's about keeping you isolated, it's about keeping you disconnected, and now it's about filtering what you can see, hear, and access. And I'll give you, people think about just online. I have a book, it's called The Black Book of Communism, and it studies 6 different countries that adopted communism. I had to order that in from the UK, believe it or not. I couldn't buy it in Canada or the United States.
Wow. I want to actually talk about something in the communism. And I was listening to somebody talk about it was Mel K. She was talking about Helena Blavatsky, who had some of her basically students that were setting up socialism and advocating for that in the United States. And she was a large contributor to the feminist movement. She was influenced over Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was a theosophist, and then Annie Besant in the UK. So when they do this, and if you look at feminism and Marxism go hand in hand. Because when you break apart the family, then you get the woman to get what she would have from her husband to come from the state. Because the primary protector of the family's liberties was the father. The mother secondary, and then to protect the kids. But the father's the one who's going out in the world and dealing with all the dirty stuff. So when you separate that, who do you have protecting the family? Now you have to bring in the state.
Yeah, you look at all these movements, whether it's the parents' movements and abortion. You look at any of these, and you look at who has been funding these activities. There's an agenda. There's an agenda for sure.
Yes, and I sit down and say that we have to restructure our families around our children and protection of them. And whatever people need to do that, they need to make that a focus. Because we cannot allow the government to take our children and educate them anymore. And so forth. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I homeschool my daughter. She's been homeschooled since grade 2, I think was the last year she attended public school. And COVID happened, and I wasn't willing to go along with the narrative. And I just went, no, I will take her at home and teach her how to read, teach her how to write, teach her how to think. And it takes me, it took us about 2, maybe 3 hours a day. So you have to wonder if I can homeschool my child, and she's definitely just as smart as her peers, believe me. If I can homeschool my child in 2 to 3 hours a day, what else are they doing in public school that they're sitting there for 7 hours a day? It's just become glorified daycare is what it's become. So, and then I control what my daughter sees. So I didn't buy into all this DEI and all this woke nonsense. So my daughter doesn't get exposed to that, or at least she gets exposed to it minimally. And then she comes home and we talk about things. So I homeschool my daughter. It's like parents have to accept responsibility for their children. It starts there. Now, a lot of people lash back out. I mean, Nadine, I can't afford to homeschool my child. I can't afford to homeschool my child either. But you have to pick your priorities. I was 39 when I had my daughter. I'm raising my daughter, right? It's like she's my daughter to raise, not somebody else's. So I'm not handing her over to the government to have them indoctrinate her into how they want her to think and behave. So and this is why they come after homeschool people all the time, right? They've in the United States, Canada, they have tried to get rid of homeschooling so hard. Right. And that's why, because they want you can't have one loose end. right? In that system. You can't have one loose end because other people are going to look and they're going to take note. Wait a minute. Oh, what? Wait. How come their outcome is so much different than mine? How come that child is so much different than the rest of them? So you have to, this is why COVID, they wanted everybody to get vaccinated. Because if everybody got vaccinated, then you don't have a control group of unvaccinated people to compare the results from.
Yes, that's exactly it. And I mean, one of the reasons why I don't get to see my youngest daughter is because I was going to homeschool. I said there was no way on God's green earth I wanted her in the school system. And I'm just going to kind of quickly wrap up on this because I know we're running up on time. When the this when the courts in COVID, families broke down at an unprecedented rate. They they showed preference to people who would go along with the government narrative. So if you opposed the government, you lost your kids. And in many cases, ridiculous things were done. Like the case of Michael Jackson. He didn't want his child vaccinated. He ended up in prison because of it. Right? These are things where that is going wrong in our society. And when you take rights away from children, that means nobody has rights. We need to change this. In a very bad way.
Well, the smallest minority in society is the individual, and you have to protect individual rights. But that means, the government has to mind its own business, to your point. But that means people have to stop making demands of the government to do more and more. My parents are guilty of this. I correct them on a regular basis. Every now and again, they'll say, the government should do something about that. And I'm like, no, the government should not. You should.
Yes, I'm a firm believer that we should solve our own problems and cut the government out as much as possible. Their job is to maintain law and order and ensure that justice is served. Outside of that, stay out of my life.
Wouldn't that be nice? Never going to happen anytime soon. That's what we're in the fight for. But that's the plan. That's the objective. That's why I think Alberta independence has such a tremendous opportunity ahead of itself. I mean, we truly could be a free nation. We can take a look at everything that's been done around the world and take the best of everything and implement it. And I think realistically right now, that's what needs to happen because trying to work within the systems that are already there, there's so much corruption and there's so many little power centers. To dismantle them all would be extremely challenging. So, this reset, and for me, I look at it with Alberta independence, is a reset. Let's take a blank sheet of paper and go, what would we want Alberta to look like?
I will agree. I think that Alberta needs to do something different. The only pathway that it's going to happen is that they're still going to have to put a lot of pressure on the existing government because there will not be a free and fair referendum question. They will manipulate it and they will cheat unless the people make sure that they hold them to account.
Danielle Smith has already said, it's my job to make sure that you don't get there, and that she's done a pretty good job of it to date.
So, I mean, we have to make sure that it doesn't happen. So what do you want to say to people before we close here? Your 2 minutes on your soapbox.
Well, we've talked about a variety of different topics and subjects today, and it doesn't matter whether you live in Alberta or you live in the United States or Canada or wherever you live around the world. The problems are the same for everybody, but it means that we have to get involved and you have to get busy and active and at least informed, and we have to have courage. I mean, my message this year has always been about courage. do not go along with something because you are trying to avoid the conflict or because you are afraid of what the consequences may be. Now, I mean, we all have to be somewhat respectful, and, it's okay to disagree with other people, but let's get to the facts. And you can't get to the facts unless you're willing to have the conversation, you're willing to have the debate. And so, when you see things like Bill C2, C9, C22 here in Canada, I mean, those are truly scary bills for me. When the government starts filtering what you can say and what you can see, what access to information you have, and then it tells you and dictates what you can say and what you cannot. Like, to Dale's point, there are verses in the Bible right now which apparently, you're not allowed to say anymore. They're racist or they're hate speech. This is not helpful, right? But it brings to the forefront the problems that exist. And you can't deny you're living in a totalitarian government system when it starts telling you what you can say and do and censoring your speech and censoring the information you have access to. So, but, the government wants you to get demoralized. They want you to feel beat up and abused, and they want you to feel overwhelmed. Don't give them the satisfaction. I mean, that's kind of how I've lived my life. People tell me I can't do something. All right, let me prove you wrong. So let's prove them wrong. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't get stressed if you need to remove yourself from the situation for a little bit. But, remove yourself from the situation and then get back into it again. So it's one of those ones for me where, don't get demoralized. Don't give them what they want. And, just find some principles that you're not willing to compromise on, and just stay true to them. Because you know what? The most important thing out of all of this is that you stay true to yourself. God bless you all.
All right, and thank you for joining us. And guys, give her follow in her some of her. I put the links in the description if you're watching on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, or on Vocal, and check out her podcast and so forth. So yeah, I'm gonna close here with a prayer because we're gonna need some of that going forward. Because
we need a lot more of that.
Yes, and I would tell people now's the time to go pick up your Bible and go back to Jesus, because more people praying, something good will happen. All right. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for love, grace, and mercy, and all the things that you have done for us, and bringing us together at this point in this time. And Lord, I ask of you this day to bless the work that Nadine is doing and others like her who are standing up for what is right, and for all the people who are standing up to protect the children, and bring the men and the women to come together to rebuild our families, our churches, our community, our nation, and that we can have some protection for the children and some freedom for the children is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Bless you. Thank you.